The morning of March 12, 2020, was like any other in the quiet suburbs of Nashville. But by midday, police stumbled upon a scene that would unravel a chilling tale of love, betrayal, and calculated murder. At the base of a construction site, a car sat crumpled against a tree. Inside, the lifeless bodies of Jernai Lamb, a 33-year-old woman with a bright smile and a complicated past, and Kason Cooper, her estranged boyfriend, were discovered. Both had been fatally shot. The story that led to their deaths was more shocking than anyone could imagine. A prominent auto dealer, a secret affair, a plot worth $500,000 to silence the truth. But when love, betrayal, and greed collide, it's only a matter of time before the truth unravels. This is the story of Fabian Strickland, a wealthy businessman who risked everything to keep his secrets buried. But as the layers peeled back, the truth behind the deaths of Jernai Lamb and Kason Cooper would send shockwaves through an entire community. To the outside world, Fabian Strickland had it all. At 46 years old, he was the embodiment of success, a wealthy Texas auto dealer, a devoted husband, and the heir to Strickland Motors, one of the most respected automotive businesses in Austin. The company, founded by his grandfather, was more than just a family business. It was a legacy, a name synonymous with trust, integrity, and success. Fabian, however, had another side, one hidden from his family, his colleagues, and the public eye. Behind the polished image of a family man and businessman, Fabian Strickland led a double life. A man of routine business trips, his travels to Nashville were far more personal than professional. Fabian had been carrying on a secret affair with a woman named Jernai Lamb, a 33-year-old waitress with a captivating presence. Jernai was vibrant, independent, and the type of woman who could light up any room she walked into. But beneath her charm was a woman searching for stability and love, something she thought she had found in Fabian. For Fabian, the affair was thrilling, a dangerous escape from the pressures of his public life. It was in the dimly lit bars and quiet hotel rooms of Nashville where Fabian and Jernai's connection thrived. Text messages between them paint a picture of their hidden world. "Good morning, beautiful," one message read, sent by Fabian during one of his many trips to the city. "I'll meet you at the bar like last time. Text when you arrive." It was a routine they had perfected over months, a game of secrets played with precision. But Fabian's visits weren't without risk. Each trip to Nashville came with the chance of exposure, something Fabian was desperate to avoid at all costs. Jernai, however, wasn't alone. Despite their estranged relationship, her ex-boyfriend, Kason Cooper, remained a looming presence in her life. At 36 years old, Kason was a man of contradictions, a persistent and jealous ex who couldn't seem to let go of Jernai, despite their turbulent history. He knew about Fabian Strickland and the affair, and he wasn't shy about making his disapproval known. For Jernai, Kason's involvement was a source of stress, but for Fabian, it was a ticking time bomb. In hindsight, Fabian's double life was as precarious as it was intoxicating. His affair with Jernai Lamb was a secret that could destroy his carefully crafted reputation, his family, and his business. And yet, he couldn't walk away. The thrill of the affair, the allure of Jernai, and the confidence that he could keep everything under control kept him coming back. But what Fabian didn't realize was that the cracks in his perfect facade were starting to show. And once those cracks widened, his entire world would begin to crumble. The pieces were all in place. A secret lover, an estranged ex, and a man with everything to lose. But this story was just beginning. And the consequences of Fabian Strickland's double life would soon spiral far beyond what he could have ever imagined. For months, Fabian Strickland had managed to keep his secret affair hidden. His trips to Nashville, his messages to Jernai Lamb, and the quiet moments they shared had all been carefully orchestrated to avoid detection. But secrets rarely stay buried for long, and Fabian's world was about to be turned upside down. Unbeknownst to Fabian, Kason Cooper, the estranged boyfriend of Jernai Lamb, was growing suspicious. Kason had always been deeply possessive of Jernai, even after their breakup. Despite their volatile relationship, he felt entitled to her, unwilling to let go of the idea that she might move on without him. When whispers of Fabian's visits to Nashville reached Kaysen, his suspicions turned into a dangerous obsession. He began watching, piecing together the puzzle of Jernai's new relationship. Then, one day, Kaysen found proof, concrete evidence of Fabian's affair with Jernai. Text messages, sweet nothings, promises of secret meetings. For Kaysen, this was more than a betrayal. It was an opportunity to turn Fabian's secret into leverage. Kaysen made his move in early March of 2020. A series of text messages arrived on Fabian's phone. Unlike Jernai's messages, these were anything but sweet. The texts were blunt, hostile, and full of threats. Kaysen wasn't interested in keeping Fabian's secret out of the goodness of his heart. He wanted payment, and he wanted it fast. "I know about you and Jernai," the first message read. "Does your wife?" Another message followed shortly after. "If you don't want her to find out, you're going to pay me a lot." For Fabian, the texts were a chilling wake-up call. The walls of his double life were closing in. Kaysen demanded payment, and he wasn't bluffing. The threats escalated quickly. "Pay up, or I'll make sure everyone knows about you," Kaysen warned. Fabian knew what was at stake. If Kaysen exposed the affair, it wouldn't just destroy his marriage. It would ruin his reputation, his family legacy, and the business he had worked so hard to protect. The pressure was unbearable. Fabian couldn't afford to let Kaysen follow through on his threats, but he also didn't trust that paying him would solve the problem. In Fabian's mind, Kaysen wasn't just a nuisance, he was a liability. And that liability had to be eliminated. What started as an affair had now spiraled into a deadly power struggle. With everything to lose, Fabian made a decision that would change the course of his life and end the lives of two others. He reached out to someone who could handle Kaysen and Jernai, someone who could take care of the problem permanently. For Fabian, the cost of silence wasn't just money. It was blood. What Fabian did next was both calculated and chilling. He reached out to a man named Keanu Walter, the owner of a private security company in Austin. Keanu claimed to have a background in special operations and was known for his discreet work in handling delicate situations. Keanu wasn't alone. He brought in two of his associates, Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen, both former Marines with extensive training. Together, the three operatives had the skills, experience, and willingness to do whatever was necessary. Fabian met with Keanu and his team in secret. It wasn't long before the plan was in motion. The goal was simple: eliminate the threat. Kaysen Cooper and Jernai Lamb had to disappear. But this was no ordinary hit. Keanu's team treated it like a military operation: surveillance, intelligence gathering, and precise execution. For Fabian, it wasn't just about getting rid of Kaysen and Jernai. It was about erasing any trace of the problem. By the time Fabian wired the first payment to Keanu's account, the decision was final. There was no turning back. The gears of a deadly machine had been set into motion. But Fabian couldn't predict how quickly the situation would spiral out of control, or how the truth would eventually come back to haunt him. As Keanu Walter and his team began their preparations, Fabian Strickland's plan grew darker, more dangerous, and more unstoppable. The lives of Jernai Lamb and Kaysen Cooper hung in the balance, and time was running out. Fabian Strickland was a man backed into a corner. Kaysen Cooper's threats had left him terrified, not just of the scandal that would destroy his life, but of the relentless nature of the man behind those messages. In Fabian's eyes, Kaysen wasn't going to stop. And as long as Jernai Lamb was alive, his secret affair would always be one step away from exposure. Fabian needed a solution, one that was permanent, one that ensured this chapter of his life would disappear forever. And he knew just who to call. Enter Keanu Walter. On paper, Keanu was a man of impressive credentials. A supposed former member of the Israeli Defense Forces and the owner of a private security firm in Austin, Texas. His company specialized in discreet operations, and Keanu had built a reputation for handling situations that required more than a subtle touch. To Fabian, Keanu was the perfect man for the job. But Keanu didn't work alone. Keanu brought in 2 operatives to assist with the operation, Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen. Both were former Marines with years of experience in special operations. Trevor was the epitome of a professional, calm, calculating, and highly skilled in reconnaissance and combat. Penny Bowen, his close associate, was known for her precision and tactical expertise. Together, they formed a lethal team, one that had no hesitation about stepping into the shadows to carry out their missions. When Fabian met with Keanu for the first time, it wasn't in a flashy office or a public place. It was behind closed doors, in secrecy, as Fabian poured out his fears and frustrations. Keanu listened carefully, assessing the man in front of him. Fabian spoke of Kaysen Cooper, the relentless threats, the affair that could ruin him, and the woman who had become both his escape and his downfall. As Fabian laid everything on the table, one thing became clear. He wasn't looking for negotiations or compromise. He wanted Kaysen and Jernai gone, permanently. For Keanu, this wasn't just a job. It was a lucrative opportunity. Fabian was willing to pay handsomely. The initial offer of $500,000 wasn't just for the elimination of Kaysen Cooper and Jernai Lamb. It was for silence, efficiency, and a clean slate. Keanu assured Fabian that he and his team would take care of everything, from surveillance to execution. But for Fabian, this wasn't just about handing over money. It was about putting his trust in 3 strangers who were about to hold his future, and his darkest secret, in their hands. The meetings were tense, filled with desperation on Fabian's side and cold calculation on Keanu's. Trevor and Penny were brought into the fold soon after, each bringing their own expertise to the table. Trevor handled logistics, creating a detailed plan for how they would track their targets, monitor their movements, and choose the perfect moment to strike. Penny focused on strategy, mapping out potential locations, routes, and contingencies to ensure nothing was left to chance. Keanu's team began their work almost immediately. Using Fabian's money, they rented vehicles, purchased burner phones, and gathered the equipment they would need. The group treated the operation with the precision of a military mission. Every step was planned, every detail accounted for. Fabian's role was simple: fund the operation and stay out of the way. But as the days went by, Fabian couldn't help but feel the weight of what he had set in motion. This wasn't a business deal. This was murder. The first wire transfer from Fabian's bank account came just days after the initial meeting. A sum of $150,000 sent directly to an account controlled by Keanu Walter. It was a down payment, proof that Fabian was committed to seeing this through. Keanu, in turn, distributed the money to Trevor and Penny, ensuring that everyone involved was well compensated for their role in the operation. Fabian believed the money would buy him freedom, but in reality, it was creating a paper trail, one that would later unravel the entire scheme. For $500,000, Fabian Strickland believed he could erase the problem. He believed he could silence Kaysen Cooper, remove Jernai Lamb, and go back to the life he had so carefully crafted. But what Fabian didn't know was that every wire transfer, every meeting, and every text message was leaving behind evidence. A trail that would one day lead authorities straight to his door. Keanu Walter and his team were ready. The plans were in place, the surveillance had begun, and the targets had been identified. For Fabian, the end of his problems was in sight. But for Kaysen Cooper and Jernai Lamb, time was running out. As Keanu, Trevor, and Penny put their plan into motion, the true extent of Fabian Strickland's desperation would come to light, and the consequences would be as devastating as they were inevitable. The plan was simple yet meticulous. Every move had to be calculated, every detail accounted for. For Keanu Walter and his team, this wasn't their first covert operation. Fabian Strickland's desperation and his $500,000 budget had ensured one thing: they would stop at nothing to carry out their mission. And so, the surveillance began. On March 5, 2020, Trevor Bautista and Keanu Walter made their way to Nashville. Their objective was clear: locate Jernai Lamb and Kaysen Cooper, confirm their routines, and prepare for the kill. Fabian Strickland had given them all the information he could: Jernai's name, address, vehicle, and the basics of her relationship with Kaysen. But for the team, details weren't enough. They needed precision. Upon their arrival in Nashville, Trevor and Keanu set to work. Armed with burner phones and equipped with rented vehicles, they began their surveillance. They tracked Journey's movements, her shifts at work, her stops at the grocery store, her visits to the gym. They noted her routines, what time she left her apartment in the morning, and when she came home at night. More importantly, they confirmed that Kaysen Cooper had been staying at her apartment on and off, just as Fabian had suspected. Kaysen wasn't just a threat. He was there, living with Journey, and he wasn't going anywhere. The reports rolled in. Each night, Trevor and Keanu compiled their findings, documenting every detail in what they referred to as the Tennessee sitrep. One of the final reports confirmed everything they needed. Journey and Kaysen were staying together, they used the same vehicle, and their patterns were predictable. The stage was set, and all that remained was execution. Fabian Strickland, back in Austin, anxiously awaited updates from Keanu. He had wired an additional $150,000 as the team completed their reconnaissance. For Fabian, each transfer felt like buying more control over his crumbling world. But with each dollar, he sank deeper into a plan he could no longer stop. Then came March 12, 2020, the day everything changed. Fabian Strickland's dark plan was set in motion. It began in the early hours of the morning when Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen arrived at Journey Lamb's apartment complex. They had chosen this day carefully, after observing her routines for over a week. Journey was scheduled to leave for work mid-morning, and Kaysen often walked her to her car in the parking lot. For Trevor and Penny, this was the perfect window of opportunity. As Journey and Kaysen stepped outside of her apartment, they had no idea they were being watched. From a parked vehicle nearby, Trevor and Penny waited, armed and ready. The moment Journey and Kaysen approached her car, Trevor stepped out, weapon in hand. The attack was swift and brutal. Shots rang out, shattering the stillness of the morning. Kaysen Cooper was hit first, multiple gunshots to the chest and abdomen. He collapsed on the pavement, his life ending within moments. He had no time to react, no chance to fight back. Journey screamed, frozen in horror as the man she once loved lay bleeding at her feet. But Trevor and Penny weren't finished. They grabbed Journey, dragging her into the back seat of their rental car. She kicked, she fought, but it was no use. Within minutes, the car sped out of the parking lot, leaving Kaysen's lifeless body behind. The drive to the construction site on Old Hickory Boulevard was long, tense, and filled with Journey's desperate pleas for her life. In the back seat, she begged for mercy, asking what they wanted, why they were doing this. But Trevor and Penny remained silent. For them, this wasn't personal. It was a mission, and Journey was just another loose end that needed to be tied up. When they arrived at the desolate construction site, the sun was just beginning to rise. The area was remote, surrounded by unfinished buildings and empty lots. It was the perfect place to ensure no witnesses, no interruptions. Journey was pulled from the car, still pleading for her life, her voice breaking as she realized what was about to happen. But her words fell on deaf ears. What happened next was both merciless and calculated. Trevor Bautista raised his weapon, and several gunshots echoed through the empty site. Journey Lamb was killed instantly, her body falling lifelessly beside the car. The killers worked quickly, discarding both bodies at the scene before abandoning the vehicle. Within hours, the burner phones they had used for communication were destroyed, and the rental car was returned. Trevor and Penny were back on the road, heading out of Nashville as if nothing had happened. By the time authorities discovered the bodies of Journey Lamb and Kaysen Cooper, the killers were long gone. The crash of the vehicle against a tree gave the illusion of an accident at first glance. But the bullet wounds told a far darker story. For the investigators, it was the beginning of a case that would expose a web of deceit, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. For Fabian Strickland, the plan seemed like a success. Kaysen Cooper was silenced. Journey Lamb was no longer a threat, and Fabian believed he could finally breathe again. But what he didn't know was that the trail of money, surveillance, and crime was far from invisible. And soon, the truth behind his dark secret would come to light. As authorities began piecing together the clues, The cracks in Fabian's perfect plan became impossible to ignore, and the deadly chain of events he had set into motion would ultimately lead to his downfall. With the murders of Jernai Lamb and Kaysen Cooper carried out, the team of hired killers shifted into the next phase of their plan, eliminating any evidence that could tie them to the crime. Fabian Strickland had paid for precision, and Keanu Walters' team promised just that. But even the most meticulous plans leave traces behind. Within hours of leaving the construction site, Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen began erasing the evidence. The burner phones they had used to coordinate their movements were destroyed, their SIM cards removed and crushed. The rental car, which had carried Jernai to her final moments, was returned to the rental agency in pristine condition. Inside, there was no blood, no DNA, nothing that could connect the vehicle to the heinous act that had just occurred. For Trevor and Penny, this was standard protocol. For Fabian Strickland, it was supposed to ensure his safety. Back in Austin, Fabian continued to fulfill his end of the arrangement. Over the course of several days, he wired a total of $500,000 to Keanu Walters' account in increments. The payments were carefully distributed to avoid suspicion. $150,000 here, $100,000 there. Each transfer was another step toward what Fabian believed was a fresh start, free of Kaysen's threats and Jernai's existence. For Fabian, the money wasn't just a payment. It was his way of buying peace of mind. But what he didn't realize was that the very paper trail he was creating would become his undoing. While Fabian and his hired team worked to cover their tracks, life in Nashville was anything but quiet. On March 12, 2020, hours after Jernai and Kaysen's deaths, a construction worker arrived at the site on Old Hickory Boulevard. It was supposed to be a routine day. Instead, he stumbled upon a horrifying scene. A car had rolled down a hill and crashed into a tree. Inside were two lifeless bodies, Jernai Lamb and Kaysen Cooper. At first glance, it looked like an accident. But as officers from the Metro Nashville Police Department arrived and began their investigation, the true horror of what had happened became clear. Kaysen Cooper's body, found slumped in the passenger seat, bore multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. Jernai Lamb, her lifeless body sprawled in the back seat, had also been shot several times. The scene was anything but accidental. This was a double homicide. For the detectives on scene, the case raised immediate questions. Who were these victims? Why had they been killed? And, most importantly, who was responsible? The investigators began their work, documenting the crime scene, collecting evidence, and looking for answers. What they didn't know yet was that the trail of this brutal murder would lead them over 700 miles away, to the doorstep of a wealthy Texas auto dealer. Meanwhile, Keanu Walter and his team celebrated their success. Keanu pocketed the final wire transfer from Fabian Strickland, a sum of $150,000. Trevor and Penny received their shares, satisfied that their job was complete. In their eyes, they had executed the perfect crime, clean, efficient, and untraceable. But no crime is ever truly flawless. What Fabian Strickland didn't count on was that no secret stays buried forever. Despite the team's efforts to erase their tracks, small details, the kind of details that seemed insignificant at the time, would soon begin to unravel their carefully laid plans. The discovery of the crashed car and the bodies of Jernai and Kaysen marked the beginning of an intense investigation. What seemed like an isolated crime scene would soon become a tangled web of evidence, greed, and betrayal. And at the center of it all was Fabian Strickland, a man whose attempt to silence the truth would ultimately bring his own dark secrets to light. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, Fabian's double life and the actions of his hired team would begin to surface, and the trail of money, surveillance, and lies would prove impossible to ignore. The discovery of Jernai Lamb and Kaysen Cooper's bodies sent shockwaves through the quiet suburbs of Nashville. What had initially appeared to be a tragic accident was now unmistakably a double homicide. But who would want these two people dead? And why? For the investigators, these questions launched a complex and methodical investigation that would eventually uncover a shocking conspiracy. The first breakthrough came when the Metro Nashville Police Department began tracing the financial and digital footprints of the victims. Jernai Lam's phone, recovered at the scene, provided crucial clues. Investigators found text messages between Jernai and a man identified as Fabian Strickland. The texts were personal, intimate, and revealing. They confirmed an ongoing affair. But it wasn't just Fabian's name that appeared in the records. Kason Cooper's phone contained a different set of texts. Hostile, threatening messages sent directly to Fabian, demanding money in exchange for silence. For detectives, it became clear that this love triangle held the key to understanding the motive behind the murders. But Fabian wasn't just another name in a string of text messages. When detectives ran his name, they discovered he was a wealthy Texas auto dealer with deep ties to the Austin business community. For a man of Fabian's stature to be involved in something like this seemed unimaginable. And yet, the evidence suggested otherwise. To dig deeper, the Metro Nashville Police Department called in reinforcements. The FBI. With the FBI now involved, the investigation took on a new level of sophistication. Agents began meticulously piecing together Fabian's financial transactions. What they uncovered was a series of large wire transfers, totaling $500,000, made over the course of several weeks. As the FBI worked to unravel the scheme, Fabian Strickland's sense of control began to crumble. Unbeknownst to him, investigators were closing in. The paper trail of wire transfers, the phone records, and the surveillance data created a mountain of evidence that pointed directly to him and his team of hired killers. By late 2020, the walls were closing in on Fabian Strickland and his team of hired assassins. The illusion of secrecy he had clung to was shattered, and the investigators were ready to make their move. On December 10, 2020, FBI agents, working alongside local law enforcement, executed a series of coordinated arrests across multiple states. In Austin, Texas, Fabian Strickland was taken into custody at his home. It was a quiet morning when agents arrived, but Fabian's calm facade quickly faded as he was handcuffed and read his rights. In the days that followed, Keanu Walter, Trevor Bautista, and Penny Bowen were also arrested in separate locations. Each suspect was charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder, along with other federal offenses. The arrests sent shockwaves through their communities. Fabian Strickland, once a respected businessman, now faced the public humiliation of being named the mastermind behind a brutal murder-for-hire scheme. Keanu Walter, who had built a reputation as a skilled security professional, was revealed to be the leader of a deadly operation. And Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen, former Marines with distinguished service records, were now exposed as hired killers willing to use their skills for profit. For investigators, the arrests were the culmination of months of relentless work. They had followed the evidence, every text message, every wire transfer, every phone call, and connected the dots of a crime that was as complex as it was horrifying. But for Fabian Strickland, this was only the beginning of his reckoning. The case that had consumed his life, his wealth, and his future was now in the hands of the justice system. As the defendants faced trial, the true depth of Fabian's betrayal and greed would come to light. And for the families of Jernai Lam and Kason Cooper, the pursuit of justice was far from over. The arrests of Fabian Strickland, Keanu Walter, Trevor Bautista, and Penny Bowen made headlines across the country. In Austin, Texas, the revelation that a prominent businessman had masterminded a murder-for-hire plot sent shockwaves through the community. Strickland Motors, a family legacy built on trust and integrity, was now synonymous with betrayal and murder. For Fabian's family, the news was devastating. The once proud heir to the Strickland empire was now a disgraced man facing life in prison. To the world, Fabian had been a pillar of the community. To his family, he was a son, a husband, and a father, roles he had destroyed with his own greed and desperation. Fabian's wife, Nia Orozco, who had stood by his side for over a decade, was left reeling. The affair was shocking enough, but the lengths Fabian went to in order to cover it up were unimaginable. For Nia, the betrayal was twofold. Fabian had not only lied to her, but had jeopardized their family's reputation and future. She filed for divorce within weeks of his arrest, publicly distancing herself from the man she once thought she knew. Fabian's parents, longtime stewards of the Strickland Motors brand, were equally blindsided. The business they had spent their lives building was now under scrutiny, with customers boycotting and employees questioning their future. Fabian's actions didn't just ruin lives. They cast a shadow over everything his family had worked for. In a tearful statement to the press, his mother said, "We are heartbroken for the families of Jernai Lamb and Kason Cooper. We can't understand how Fabian could have done this. We will carry this shame for the rest of our lives." In Nashville, the fallout was just as intense. The community mourned the loss of Jernai Lamb, a young woman with dreams of a better future, and Kason Cooper, a man whose life had been cut short in a violent and senseless act. Jernai's family spoke publicly about her vibrant personality, her love of life, and her struggles to find stability. "She didn't deserve this," her mother said during a televised interview. "She had so much life left to live, and it was stolen from her." Kason's family, too, grappled with the loss. Though their relationship with him had been strained at times, they remembered him as someone who always tried to fight for what he believed in. His sister, choking back tears during a memorial service, said, "He made mistakes, but he didn't deserve to die like this. None of this should have happened." The trial of Fabian Strickland and his co-conspirators began in late 2021, drawing national attention. The courtroom was packed as prosecutors presented their case, methodically laying out the evidence. The wire transfers, the burner phone records, the surveillance footage, and the damning testimony from cooperating witnesses. Fabian, who sat stoically throughout most of the trial, pleaded not guilty, claiming that he had been coerced into the plan by Keanu Walter. But the evidence told a different story. Keanu Walter, the supposed mastermind behind the operation, was also unrepentant during the trial. His defense painted him as a professional simply fulfilling a contract, a chilling reminder of the cold, transactional nature of the crime. Trevor Bautista and Penny Bowen, who had carried out the murders, showed little emotion as prosecutors described the brutal events of March 12, 2020. The jury heard how Trevor had pulled the trigger multiple times, how Penny had helped drag Jernai to the car, and how they had disposed of the bodies without hesitation. For the families of Jernai and Kason, listening to these details was almost unbearable. The trial lasted several weeks, but the verdict was swift. On all counts, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, kidnapping resulting in death, and carrying a firearm during a crime of violence, Fabian Strickland was found guilty. The same verdict was handed down to Keanu Walter, Trevor Bautista, and Penny Bowen. In a final hearing, Fabian was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, Fabian sat motionless, his face pale, as the weight of his actions came crashing down. For Jernai Lamb and Kason Cooper's families, the verdict was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but no sentence could bring their loved ones back. Jernai's mother, speaking after the trial, said, "I hope Fabian Strickland spends the rest of his life thinking about what he's done, but nothing will ever fill the void he left in our family." In the years that followed, the case became a cautionary tale, a story of greed, betrayal, and the catastrophic consequences of trying to cover up the truth. Strickland Motors, once a thriving business, shut its doors within months of Fabian's conviction. The Strickland family name, once a badge of honor, became a mark of shame. For Fabian, his life of wealth and privilege had been exchanged for a prison cell, where he would spend the rest of his days. But amidst the devastation, Jernai Lamb and Kason Cooper's families worked to preserve their legacies. Jernai's family started the Lamb Light Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse and raising awareness about the dangers of coercive control. Kason's family, in their grief, created scholarships in his name, helping troubled youth find paths to better futures. While their lives had been cut tragically short, their memories lived on, shining a light in the darkness left by Fabian's actions. A case of betrayal, greed, and unimaginable tragedy. But justice, though delayed, ultimately prevailed. The story of Fabian Strickland serves as a reminder that no secret, no matter how carefully hidden, can stay buried forever. And for the families of Jernai Lamb and Kason Cooper, It is a testament to their strength in the face of unimaginable loss. Jernai Lam and Kason Cooper were more than victims of a senseless crime. They were people, full of life, love, and dreams for the future. But their story reminds us of the fragility of trust and how greed, betrayal, and power can spiral into tragedy. In the end, no amount of money or influence can bury the truth forever. This case is a chilling testament to the consequences of unchecked ambition and the lengths some will go to protect their secrets. It is a story that forces us to confront the darkest parts of human nature and serves as a reminder of the strength and resilience of those left behind to seek justice. While Jernai and Kason's lives were cut short, their legacies continue to shine, a beacon of hope and remembrance for others. Because the truth, though often painful, is always worth uncovering. If you've been moved by this story and want to uncover more true crime cases, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Join us as we continue to explore stories of justice, mystery, and the enduring fight for truth.